Okay, so let's now get into it's not even really a mea culpa interview that Ted Cruz gave to Sean Hannity on Fox News, because he doesn't really say he did anything wrong other than saying, I realized, I think he says, like, as he was getting on the plane to go to Cancun, convenient time to realize it, that maybe the optics of the trip weren't quite so good. So let's get into Ted Cruz's various explanations for the misguided trip to Cancun last week. Again, to reset the story for you, Texas gets hit with storms and cold, which causes power outages. Many Republicans try to blame frozen wind farms for the power outages. That's wrong. Most of the problem with electricity supply in Texas was caused by frozen instruments at nuclear power plants, at natural gas power plants, and at coal power plants. Yes, some windmills froze. Mostly the problem was the fossil fuels and the nuclear. And of course, the reason for this is not because wind farms and nuclear and coal and gas can't produce power in cold weather. It's because Texas, even though a decade ago had a similar power outage and got a report saying, here's how you winterize all of these types of power generation, they didn't do it. So that's why this is going on. Okay, so here are Ted Cruz's explanations for why, in the midst of all this, he decided to go to Cancun and then come back. First, relatively early in the scandal, Ted Cruz's office put out a statement basically throwing his own daughters under the bus, saying, quote, with school canceled for the week, our girls asked to take a trip with friends. Wanting to be a good dad, he just wants to be a good dad, everybody. With wanting to be a good dad, I flew down with them last night and I'm flying back this afternoon. Now, unfortunately, the decision to fly back, quote, this afternoon was not the originally scheduled trip of Ted Cruz. He changed his ticket to fly back immediately, 20 hours after landing, because the story exploded. And we know that Ted Cruz went down there with a bunch of luggage. We later learned he had a flight booked not for Friday, but for the weekend. So he had to change his explanation once that got out. He had intended to stay for several days. Cruz had the amount of luggage I bring on a 10-day trip, and he wanted us to believe it was a 20-hour trip. So that one imploded very quickly. Then Ted Cruz is interviewed at the Cancun airport on his way back. Let's take a look at that video.
So I flew down with them last night, dropped them off here, and now I'm headed back to Texas and back to continuing to work to try to get the power on. What's happening in Texas is unacceptable, and a lot of Texans are hurting.
The valiant and brave public servant heading back from a 20-hour trip to get the power back on. Wait a second. It wasn't even a vacation. He was basically just chaperoning the flight down and he was going to work remotely. Okay. So then Ted Cruz, upon returning to Texas, agrees to do the big interview with Fox News propagandist Sean Hannity to really clear the air and get back in the good graces of the American people. It starts with Sean Hannity sucking up to Ted Cruz. So right after we saw this, we knew it wasn't going to be a real interview.
And you were fully and completely engaged. And I know that from my own reporting and my own conversations with you and Governor Abbott and with Joe Bastardi.
So a priori, before the interview, Sean Hannity already has cleared Ted Cruz of wrongdoing. Great for Ted. So then Hannity keeps doing it, keeps it going, and says, listen, you can be a senator and just make a quick round trip to Cancun.
I think you can be a father and be the senator of Texas all at the same time and make a round trip, quick drop-off trip and come home.
Well, Sean, that's right. And
Hannity barely stopping short there of, I would be worried if you weren't going to Cancun in the midst of this, Senator. What a hero and what a great father you are. Thank you so much. Okay, so finally it's Ted Cruz's turn, and he goes into his explanation.
Our house was dark. We had no heat. Actually, the fireplace behind me, we were all huddled around the fireplace because it was the only heat in the house. And after a couple of days, after the girls being really cold, it being in the teens and the 20s outside, our girls said, look, school's been canceled for the week. Can we take a trip and go somewhere warm? And Heidi and I, as parents, we said, okay, sure. And so last night I flew down with them to the beach, and then I flew back this afternoon. I had initially planned to stay through the weekend and to work remotely there, but as I as I was heading down there, I started to have second thoughts almost immediately.
So notice there that Ted Cruz, because he was outed as having a round trip ticket where he wasn't coming back until the weekend, he had to say, I initially planned to stay through the weekend, which is true, but he realized he really should be in Texas, by which he means I got caught. The blaming of the daughters is hilarious too. And I was thinking, like, what kid demands to go on vacation the next day to Mexico and gets the okay from their parents? Like, growing up for me and all of my friends, vacations and trips were planned in advance. Hey, mom and dad, let's go to Cancun tomorrow, like in 12 hours. Sure, let's do it. I'm just trying to be a good dad. This was simply escaping a bad situation in the United States and fleeing across the U.S.-Mexico border that way, south, for a better situation in Cancun. That's all that this was. And then one last clip, which is really funny. In continuing to explain the Cancun trip, Ted Cruz casually mentions that a lot of his daughter's friends were over for dinner. There's a pandemic going on. What are you doing having multiple kids over from multiple households?
Tonight we had a bunch of kids at our house because our house was one of the few houses that had power. And so we had a lot of our daughter's friends were over. We were making dinner for them. And right about, 6:30, boom, the lights go out and we lose power. And so we had a candlelight dinner because that's all we had. We had flashlights, and then the girls all camped out. They got in sleeping bags and wrapped up in comforters and everything.
And then we flew to Cancun, and it was all great, Sean. Truly, truly great. So a big explanation from Ted Cruz that quite frankly explained nothing other than what we thought, which is Ted Cruz continues to live in his own world. And when the outside world got into his life, he lost power. He decided to flee across the border to the country of Mexico. He should resign. There are many calls for his resignation. He's not going to resign. We'll have more coverage of this on our Instagram at David Pakman Show. By the way, if you want to see what happened to my hair thanks to the wind over the weekend, follow me on Instagram at david.pakman. It's bizarre, and it's probably not something you want to let children see. It's really it's a hair disaster, for lack of a better term. Quick break, back after this. I want to take a second to tell you about one of our sponsors, S&H Masks. S&H Masks has everything you need when it comes to face masks and other protective gear for COVID-19, and they're giving my audience 20% off. S&H Masks is the company that I've personally been going to for face masks. I love and trust the products they sell, and that's actually why I reached out to them about being a sponsor. I've tried tons of different face masks this year, like many of you, and I still have not found a mask that is more comfortable or easier to breathe in than the washable cotton masks that they sell. It's made of a silky, lightweight cloth that feels great on the skin, has a convenient adjustable strap. They also have disposable cloth masks, which are really comfortable, as well as all of the other gear like face shields, alcohol wipes, no-touch infrared thermometers. And all of their prices are very reasonable. I also love S&H Masks because they've donated over 60,000 masks to healthcare institutions. They're an excellent company. Shipping is just $5, and shipping is free on orders over $150. You can get there by going to davidpakman.com/mask. The link is under this video, and you can save 20% on everything in their store when you use the coupon code DAVID.